This is the podcast between an old school mentor and a digital mentee on managing and/or working with people, navigating a career, growing profits, and not killing your coworkers along the way. Now let's join the consultant, Hayden Shaw, and the millennial who fixes Hayden's iPhone, Seth Tower Hurd.
This is the consultant and the millennial. The tagline is lead, manage, profit, win, and don't kill your coworkers along the way. We've done marketing, we've done a lot of management stuff, we've done leadership stuff, we've done people problem stuff. We haven't specifically talked about not killing your coworkers along the way.
It's been kind of a sub-theme since, you are not the most patient human being on the planet. So when we talk about your experiences, it has been a sub-theme about not killing your coworkers. But that's right. We've never had a time when we've just talked about some of the subspecies of people who give us homicidal fantasies.
So subspecies, like, is in-laws a subspecies? No.
People who make us crazy. In-laws can do it, but I have to go on record saying my mother-in-law, who lives with us and could kill me in my sleep, she is wonderful, and I love her as much as my own mom. And we keep her in the basement, and so it all works out okay.
That actually sounds kind of sinister. We keep her in the basement.
It does, and it's a wonderful walkout basement with a lot of natural light for her macular degeneration. And I really do love her as much as my own mom. I'm a very fortunate man to have a mother-in-law like that. So if you want to look into my books and see in the
acknowledgments.
The acknowledgments, thank you. I could not remember that. I actually mentioned her in there because I do love her, and she could kill me.
Okay, so what are the actual subcategories here? Because I'm thinking about how would I categorize people that have driven me the most crazy working with them.
Well, name some.
People who need a lot of details from me that I feel like I've already shown them. So like once I've trained you on something 5 or 6 times and I don't have the authority to fire you, which now that I'm never going to be in that situation again because I own companies, that really drives me absolutely bonkers to not be able to, like, it's like I've trained you 5 times. You're still asking me the same questions. Anybody who lies or manipulates people, especially emotionally, like I'm just out. I'm ready to get rid of you. But of course, we're talking to people who maybe are not necessarily in a position to fire people. So there'd be 2 that are really, really
and I know a lot of managers who would feel exactly the way you do. I've already shown you how to do this. I've already explained it. As a matter of fact, in one of the free videos I put on my website, on how to cut your generational turnover in half. I think it's the 3rd or 4th, maybe it's the 4th of the free videos, is on the big challenge that a lot of Gen X managers have. And all managers have it, but Gen Xers probably bring it up the most, and all around the world is, if I wanted to show you how to do it, I would not have hired you. Hayden, what is wrong with some of these new hires, millennials, or these new hires, who want me to give them templates and won't just go figure it out? So that's a classic slice of some of the people who can drive you crazy, and the other one is people who lie or at least aren't fully honest, and people who are manipulative. And I talked about in a past episode that passive aggressive people are my kryptonite. I would put that in the manipulative category, the passive aggressive folks. And let me give you 4 or 5 other classic categories that drive people crazy. The know-it-all person, the person who always has to be right, and will waste 20 minutes of a meeting either arguing about why they're right or having the last word, or they are constantly tooting their own horn. That can drive people crazy. And then you've got people who are mentally ill or are really emotionally dysfunctional. So all of us have some levels of dysfunction, and we get under each other's skins with those levels of dysfunction. But, there are some people who grew up in some significantly dysfunctional situations, or are clinically mentally ill, but are still functional and still have a job.
And by the way, we're both huge proponents of help for people like that. I am very forthright about the fact that I've been to counseling several times. In fact, people ask me what's the first thing you should buy if you're going to start a business, or what's the first thing you need to do. And I always say go to counseling before you ever write a business plan, because
I've never heard you say that. I think that it's absolutely astute advice.
You've never asked me about starting a business, so I'm not sure.
I've never asked you about how mentally ill you are. So yeah.
No, seriously, I always just tell people, be in a really healthy spot so you're not making decisions trying to show up somebody in high school who bullied you. Oh, well, I'm going to do this to or prove my grandmother wrong.
That is
never
really, really helpful.
Do that before you read a business book, before you buy any kind of website. And I sell websites, and I'm telling you, if it comes down to having me do your website or you getting counseling, go to counseling. And it doesn't matter if you feel like you're in a healthy spot. If you're going to go into something as intense as starting a business, go to counseling. But if you work with people
it will bring out every last crack in your psyche, will it not?
It will.
Yeah.
And it'll be the best thing that you have probably spent money on in a decade. But if there are people who are seriously struggling with mental illness, and the common ones, bipolar, depression, anxiety, those people can make some very poor choices at work and can just drive you absolutely crazy and can cost the company a lot of money. And you cannot drag them to counseling. You can't diagnose them. Even when it's obvious.
That's right. And so what do you do if you either manage or you work alongside those people? And in past episodes, we've talked about the folks I call light eaters, the truly depressed, not clinically depressed. They're folks who are just negative and they suck the life out of everyone around them. And they're not a large part of the population. So go back and listen to that. We won't go into those in detail here, but those folks can do it. And then you've got the perpetually happy. Some of us find cynical folks easier to deal with than the perpetually happy. Isn't it wonderful? No, it's not wonderful. They're donuts. They bought them at a store. Can you not see the grocery store label on the donuts? Somebody drove by the grocery store last night and brought in donuts because they're too cheap to get Panera to deliver stuff for our meeting today. No, it's not that great.
I would actually say I'm a pretty optimistic person. I'm very happy. And also I have a very deadpan personality that gets annoyed when people are too chipper. Is that fair?
No, that's right. And so, what do you do when you're around some of these different folks? Let's deal with some of the more challenging on the list. And that would be, so let's just talk about manipulative people. What do you do with manipulative people? And how do you best deal with them?
First thing, I'm just going to say, if you can, you just need to fire them. I had a project manager who was gossiping about me to my graphic designer, who I've known for over a decade, who is also a personal friend, and she was just out. It's like, no, I'm paying you. If you're talking crap about me, we are done.
Well, more than that, you're not performing, and so you're talking crap about me to somebody who's known me for 10 years, because that's obviously what you've learned in your work experience is when it's not going well, you throw up a big smoke screen around the boss to anybody who will listen. And in this case, she just happened to have done it with somebody who knew you well.
And she swore to slander my name up and down. I'm like, good. Do it, because your friends are probably losers because they hang out with you. So let's make sure that they don't come work for me either.
That's right. Please scorch all earth. Because whatever possible customers you could turning off people I might hire who might know you would still be a better benefit. That makes some sense, and you can see how little patience Seth has with manipulative folks. But manipulative people who will bend the truth or play some emotional games. And, it goes back to something we've talked about a number of times. How much can you live with? How much can you live with? You don't have a lot of patience with it. And if somebody were complaining about me to other of my employees, that'd be worth a conversation. And if they're doing it to cover up their own lack of performance, then you bet they're out.
Yeah, and as far as how much you can live with, just so you don't think of a total monster. If somebody's really going through something, and I'm talking, sick spouse, sick kid, death in the family, some kind of other
breakup,
circumstances, breakup. Oh, I went through a couple of pretty close to marriage relationships that thank God didn't work out in my mid-20s to, early 30s or early, I guess I got married when I was 31.
And I've watched Seth. I've chatted with Seth when he had people who were going through things. Matter of fact, he was working on my website when he had somebody who was going through something, and he is the most compassionate. He goes, it's just going to be late because this is what this person's got going on. and he's going to need a couple of weeks to put that as the focus.
And that's how I've kept people with me for 10 years. So if you're really going through a hard time, like I'm the person who will give you slack and buy you dinner. Because,
that's a fair story.
I know, like I'll make sure your family has pizza that night so you don't have to cook. But if you flip and lie to me, it will be scorched earth. Like I will pour salt in the ground so nothing ever grows there again.
The difference is it's underperformance. If it's a person who performs, a person you can trust, a person who's honest with you. Manipulative people play games, and some of us are fairly black and white as to what's truthful and what's not. And others of us are more comfortable with people exaggerating or under-reporting, not making up numbers, as I like to joke in some of my training sessions. So you get a spreadsheet and somebody has printed it off and whited out their number and handwritten in with a marker a different number than what's showing up in the spreadsheet. That's not just exaggeration or underreporting. That's like fraud. You're bold-faced lying. But there are some people who just exaggerate, or there are some people who don't always say everything they know. Or my, Stephen Covey, great guy, good friend, and, sold millions of copies of The Speed of Trust. He had one of the most insightful things in that book where he talked about people who tell the truth but leave the wrong impression. And you just got to decide how much of exaggeration or underreporting or communicating in a way that promotes my best interest you can live with, and how much you prefer it to be just straight up blunt. And that's where you have to know what you can live with. I prefer people to be fairly honest. And once I know, because I don't like wondering about people. But I've worked in companies where I was just one of a number of employees where I had to work alongside somebody I wondered about. And you just have to do more reconnaissance. You have to go double check what they say more often. And if I hired an employee, I wouldn't put up with it. But as a colleague, you can get along with those people if you just realize it's going to take a lot more time to double check their story.
Okay, what's the next category of people who are really tough?
Well, let's talk about some different ways people can manipulate. Let's just focus on that one today.
Okay.
Because manipulation has so many parts to it. And the people that I find, this person who covered up their tracks, their underperformance by trying to stir it up with other people. There are some people who love drama. I remember I was working in a hospital and this woman said, all right, the phlebotomist, it is such a drama group. I will literally schedule people to work away from each other, and they will switch. They'll go shift who they work with against my schedule so they can go back with their drama teams and gossip about each other. She goes, I just dream of slapping them all. I will literally have dreams at night that I just slap them because they love drama. And there are some people who just love drama. And look at your face. Such face.
No, I'm about to tell a story. You finish that.
Yeah, but he's like, and it's a beautiful thing. I have been very fortunate. I am married to a person who's low drama. As a matter of fact, she would say I'm the more dramatic of the two. And it's funny, all my kids only fall in love with people who are very low drama, reasonable. It's not that their mother can't yell. Don't get me wrong. She's been a little wound up this week, but I probably shouldn't say that while we're recording, but because she would want equal time to go, no, you're just a jerk. But she's been a bit about wound up this week. Doesn't mean she can't have it, but she's just low on drama and high on reasonableness. And there are some people who just like to stir it up. They find work to be more interesting. And even some high performers are this way. When there's more stimulation, there's something stirred up, and they enjoy being the one that stirs it up.
No, I think that, we're recording during the Olympics. This will come out after the Olympics. But there are Shaun White, who won the gold medal. He said, he almost has to put himself in a place where he's losing to have his best performance. I don't think I'm that way. And, when we talk about people who just need it, I try to be pretty careful.
Well, he said he lost at Sochi because he just wasn't motivated. He just didn't care. So the one, he loses, he didn't win at the Olympics. Then he goes, I should have retired because I just didn't care enough.
Didn't want it enough.
Didn't want it enough. So he has to be in a hole to want it enough to bring out his best stuff.
Yeah. As far as wanting to be around people who are, not high drama, I try to be very careful about what I say and have a lot of nuance and be pretty thoughtful if I do say anything about politics on social media. And I get away from it more and more because there's just so much business stuff to say and there's only so much of a news hole, right? There's only so many things I can say online. But I try to say something pretty nuanced about a situation that's going on this week that may not be as big of a deal in a couple weeks. And I had somebody come back to me and basically it was a work, kind of a casual associate's girlfriend that I'd been on a corporate retreat with and just basically said, you're a monster. You want to take all the widows and orphans and put them on a train track and run them all over and make them die. I mean, that's basically what she said. And I just said back to her, if you don't text everybody that we both know and tell them what a monster you are, I actually don't respect you because you're not, if these are really your convictions, then I don't respect you because you don't follow your convictions. And if you don't believe that I'm actually a monster, then you're a liar and you have your own set of issues. Either way, make sure you let your boyfriend know that as the company is growing and I'm going to need more website coders, I will never hire him again because I don't want to deal with you. And I won't. It's over.
One of my best friends just posted today about how social media does so many things well, and what it does not do well is it does not do discourse well. He goes, so many posts on social media about important issues are like somebody going out on their deck in their underwear and screaming what they think and then going back inside. And I'm still stuck with the visualization of many of my neighbors in their underwear on their decks. So that one's not working for me. But, what I wrote back, what I responded, because somebody goes, well, what do we do? How do we fix that? I said, well, part of the way we fix it is we just ask people, like you did. You just ask people to say it again. You know what? I'm sorry, that wasn't helpful. Say it again, because you can't actually mean that. And, there are just some people who are high drama and they enjoy stirring stuff up. And if we're the boss, we need to pull them aside and say, what happened in that meeting was not helpful. I'd like you to re-say it. What? Yeah, I'd like you next week to re-say it. I'm going to start off the meeting by saying, we chatted about it and I discovered that that's not what, let's say this person's name was Amber. That's not what Amber meant. Came across differently than Amber meant it. And I just want to give Amber a chance to re-say it. And, I learned something about that in a church of all places where a great guy named Dallas Willard, he said, if you have trouble lying, the absolute best way to cure lying is to go apologize and go tell somebody, I lied to you. I did not tell you the full truth. Here's what the truth, and I want to apologize. He goes, most people, when they lie, want to hide it. They don't apologize for it, so they never fix it because it never hurts enough. If you want to quit lying, every time you lie, you just need to go apologize. And I don't lie very often, but I discovered that, wow, it is, if you make that pact with yourself, you will stop. If you ask people who are dramatic, who stir stuff up, to restate things, why don't you re-say that in our next meeting, on our next conference call? Try that again. Or tell you what, why don't you send an email that apologizes for not being clear and then re-clarifying? What? If you'll do that, if you're the manager and can do that, you will help some of those people either post out of your group because they're tired of you being always on them, or they'll begin to go, you know what, the pain of doing this is worse than the pleasure, the thrills that come from doing this. I think I'm done.
And actually, I think it was you that taught me this, that we think that when we have something that's difficult, if we're in management, that we can only do one of two things. We can just fire them, or we can just take the beating and be like the elephant, back when, elephants used to be in the circus and they would treat elephants pretty horribly, chain them up with chains and beat them. So the elephant learned when there's something around their leg, they couldn't get away, and then they could tie them up with anything. We think that, if I can either fire this person or I can let them beat me until I can be tied up with a piece of twine and I won't run off. And the middle road is actually what needs to happen almost all the time, which is you correct all their mistakes and just make them do the right thing. And almost always they'll leave on their own. Sometimes you may still have to fire them, and they'll either get a lot better or they'll get frustrated and get out the door.
That's true. And for most of us, it's about consistency and relentlessness. I had a client who said they had a person who grew when the organization was smaller and got to the place where she wasn't performing well anymore, and she was incredibly talented, but it was time for her to be a VP and not to be a performer.
Yeah.
And she was good at what she did, but she was just not good. And she liked people around her who would do it for her, who she could delegate to, but she wasn't very good at turning them into creating people who were as good as she was. And so she had 1,000 reasons why. And I finally said to him, you all back off. And you've trained her to be able to do that. If after 10 years you want to consistently see this behavior, you will have to be relentless every week. Same 4 things. Every week, same 4 things. And she's a good person, and she didn't do it manipulatively, but she would cry when she was really stressed out because she knew she couldn't do what they were asking. She would cry. And one of the dynamics I've seen, I even had people ask me, what do I do? I'm a guy. Once again, I'm not saying it always happens this way. This is not a sexist comment. This is a description of guys who say, I don't know what to do when a woman cries. And I've actually had women admit to me, I cry because I know I will melt my manager and get what I want. That's not at all what she was doing, but she would cry and they would not know what to do. They'd be so flabbergasted. And, I don't know. Maybe I'm cruel. I just have the ability to let people cry when they're stressed and then wait at the end of it. And so she cried for an hour. And a meeting I was leading with all of them, and off and on for an hour. And she finally was like, I just don't know that this is going to work. And they never made it that far because they found it difficult to be consistent every week.
Her.
And then finally, when they were consistent, she would just cry, and they're like, okay, we're just being mean now.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. She was blowing off emotion. She felt herself to be a bit trapped, and she didn't know if she could do what they wanted. And finally, she found another job. And the wonderful thing was she actually hired me to work with this other company and has thanked me for helping her make the transition. And we just have to be relentless with what we need to see from people who can be who can lie a bit, who can be manipulative a bit, and especially who can be dramatic.
And so this is all stuff that's pretty easy for us to say on a podcast. What's hard is to keep it up for 4 months, I'm guessing. Because that other person, you recommended a book that my wife and I both kind of skimmed through. I think she read it a little more than I did, called The Dance of Anger. And usually people you call it change back behavior, and most people will become more desperate and thrash around more.
Yeah. Good memory. It's based on family systems theory, which is not as popular as it was 15 years ago, but it still has a lot of good, valid stuff to it. It says we all play roles. We train people how to treat us the way they treat us. And Dance of Anger, Harriet Lerner. I was chatting. I was getting my hair cut yesterday, and there was another person getting her hair colored. And the woman who's cutting my hair was asking about, what do we do to get more respect from people? And so we're chatting, and I mentioned that book. And it's funny, the woman who was, basically waiting to get her hair set, she said, what's the name of that? I'm going to go write it down. And so it's a great book that gives some very practical ideas on how we help other people change. And change back's one of her big ideas, is that when we ask somebody to do something differently, they will push back on us to go back to the way things were, because they know the rules, we know the rules, they know the dance. And we let anger tell us that it matters to us, and we're getting angry because we're tired of what's going on. And 2 other big ideas in that book that I think are huge, that I've used a lot in coaching. Number 1, when we yell and argue with people, we are actually saying, don't change. All we're doing is blowing off steam. It is, sorry for those of you who think this is gross, it's just emotional flatulence. We are blowing off excess gas, but we don't ever expect anything to change. When we want something to change, we mention it, we give explanation of it, and then we change what we do and force them to readjust to our next move. But they will push back on us to go back. They will manipulate us to go back Change back to the roles we had before.
And so it totally changes the game when you can see this, right? Because then it takes away this like, oh my gosh, somebody's upset. I will admit I've had trouble with crying women too as a manager, not really sure what to do about it. And once I understand that people are getting into this, I just want my job back. I want things to be comfortable again. And I have the option, I have free will to make sure that they don't get that job back the same way. They're not comfortable. The company does not exist, or the nonprofit does not exist for you to be comfortable.
Right.
Whatever it is, nonprofit, for-profit, mom and pop shop, corporation, whatever, the company exists to hopefully serve people and to achieve goals in one way or another. And a lot of times, if you being comfortable is your number one agenda, you're taking that comfort away from what the company needs to be doing.
And people are going to put pressure on you to change back. You just stay the course, change your behavior, and especially if you can blow off the steam that comes from the frustrations with dealing with them and remain calm. You can deal with manipulative people much more effectively. It's funny. While I was getting my hair cut, the woman who was waiting, she said to the hairdresser, she said, if you can just not play their game, if you can not stoop to their level, if you can not get caught up in it. And how many of us, once we've been, when we were growing up, we were kids and somebody hit us, we were like, I'm going to hit you back. And learning to not respond in kind actually gives us an incredible amount of emotional energy and power. She goes, you feel bad. You lose your cred and you lose your confidence because you feel bad that you let them turn you into that. And they can say, kind of the classic, back when I did some counseling, I worked in recovery kind of stuff. Alcoholics would say, well, if you had to live with somebody like that, you'd drink too. And the irony was, until their spouse began to quit trying to control things and chilled out and stayed calm, the alcoholic always had an excuse for why they drank. But when they no longer got all emotionally wound up in it, the alcoholic's like, I got a problem. Not always, but often. And so goes back to go get counseling before you go start a business. Go deal with your own stuff first. Get your emotions calmed down, whether it's alcohol or, that is a joke, whether it's alcohol or Benadryl. So that's a nut allergy, and there was a little nut duster around him at lunch. So he's doing really well for a man on Benadryl, but he's now rubbing the side of his face.
Gosh. Yeah.
So I think he's melting on us. We better wrap up.
Well, let me ask two questions before we wrap up, right? So if I can kind of put a bow on what we've talked about so far, it is remain calm. And stay the course.
Whatever you have to do to get to your calm place. Pilates, I always joke, Pilates, alcohol, counseling, prayer, and the alcohol is a joke. Most of us really will get fired if we have a hip flask at work.
Yeah, all but people in Wisconsin.
As a person who lives in Wisconsin, you can say that. Please send your mail to Seth Heard.
Hey, I wasn't condoning it. I don't think I shared this on the podcast. I asked a client to meet at The Buzz, which is a coffee shop in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and it autocorrected to The Bar at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday, and I got a heck yes text back, and I'm like, hashtag only in Wisconsin. Okay, let's wrap up on, because we've talked about this a lot from the manager side of things. If you have someone you're reporting to who is highly manipulative, who is very difficult. I've had this conversation with somebody pretty recently. Of course, you can be looking for another job, but usually you don't get another job in like 3 days. So how do you handle a very manipulative manager?
Oh, manipulative managers are the trickiest ones of all. You decide if you need to eat indoors. Abraham Maslow was an optimist. You're like, okay, I would love to, and self-actualization is not what he finished his life believing in. Self-transcendence, a purpose higher than myself, is what Abraham Maslow actually taught. Creativity, self-transcendence, a deep sense of meaning. No, my boss is a manipulative jerk, or just really manipulative and difficult. Mentally, do I find this job really amazing? Yeah, but he's just so manipulative. I just takes all my energy to deal with it. I don't care anymore. Social emotional. Nope. Just wears me out. Physical. I need a paycheck until I find something else.
That's it.
You just do what can you do? You can, if he's manipulative because it's a power thing, you roll over like your dog and show your belly. You are the pack lead. I acknowledge that. Whatever.
So this is one of the times where you just have to choke down your words and get on Indeed.com at 5:05 p.m. and look for a job until 9 o'clock.
That's exactly what you do. The other piece is you let cooler heads prevail. For most people, manipulative bosses, they see through them fairly quickly. Not everybody. There are some folks that are not that wise. There are some folks that are not that sharp, or some folks that are just not good at reading people. And those people will often be like, what are we going to do? Or my boss is. And the vast majority of people are like, just put your head down and do your job, because it's your turn in the barrel now. They'll come after you next. I've got some good friends, and she is an exceptional teacher. I mean, she's one of those teachers that have a gift. I actually helped her write a resume, and when I did a cover letter, I said, you have the gift. You have the gift. You're amazing with kids. And they said to her, because the principal just was on her at her second year, just on her. And if I gave details, somebody might hear this and could probably tell who it was. Just the most nitpicky things around carpet squares. It was just unbelievable. And somebody been there a while said, you know what? She picks one teacher who's in the barrel and she rides them until she fires them, and it looks like you're in the barrel. And you know what? All you can do is put your head down, and usually they switch and another person gets in the barrel and your time's over, and you're just kind to the survivors and you go on your way. It gets really tricky when they're manipulative upstairs and they're trashing you.
Yeah. And by the way, you might be working for somebody who's actually great, who's a rock star in their field, and they just do this. Steve Jobs totally did this. He'd ask somebody in the elevator what they were working on, and then he'd get obsessed with it, and he'd wind up firing the team because they weren't good enough. And people wound up trying to avoid Steve in the Apple headquarters. And obviously, transformative leader, very brilliant thinker, but he also had this thing going on. And so even if it's somebody you like, sometimes you just got to get out.
Well, that's right. And so, and you may say, I love what I'm doing. I really believe in the mission, and I'm going to do this until politically I got no chips left and I have to leave. I've seen people in nonprofits they really believe in stay in a job, or I've seen people who have some kids who, who have trouble making friends, who have finally found some great friends in junior high, and they're like, they can pistol whip me every other day. And now that my kid has some friends, I will stay for the next 3 years until they fire me. And they do what they have to do. And then sometimes you just finally go up to your boss and never do this. I had a guy in the FBI say to me, "Oh, you never point a gun you don't intend to fire. You don't point a gun that's not loaded. You don't bluff people with guns. You don't bluff with life and death." I love that phrase. Don't point a gun unless you intend to fire it. If you go up to your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss and you say, "This is what's going on, and my boss is not being square with you," you just hit a launch sequence that may or may not go the way you want it to go. And be comfortable with losing your job, be comfortable with not getting references, go do the right thing, and it may take you and 3 other people before that person loses a job. I had a virtual admin, Natasha, whose husband worked in a non-profit organization. They asked him to do some illegal things. The head of finance, the CEO and the head of finance asked him to do illegal things. He said, "I will not do it." They fired him. Took him about 7 months to find another job because he was fired by a well-known organization. The FBI then calls him in about a year later and goes, "We have been watching this place for 10 years," because they're using federal dollars.
Yeah.
"And we never found anybody who would quit or who would tell them no. And you finally hit the launch sequence that allow us to put these people behind bars." Now, he paid a price for that. It took him a while to find a job, but he actually helped a nonprofit organization that was stealing money that was supposed to be going to at-risk people and helping them get jobs. And he actually stopped fraud from taxpayers and money that was stolen from people who need it most in society. And don't point a gun you don't mean to do. Don't push a launch sequence you think you're going to win and then be mad you don't get it your way. Knowing that it may take you and then 2 other people to have the courage to do that before they realize just how bad that person is. And do what you got to do and get on with things.
Hey, if Hayden sounds brilliant, it's because he is. You can check out more at peopledrivenresults.com. You're having management issues, people issues, change issues. You can hit up Hayden. You can also hit me up at digitalprofitfarm.com. Odds are you're losing more money than you realize on your website. Let me help you fix that and get you back to making cash again. Also, my company does do social media management and podcasting, and we reach hundreds of thousands of people actually every single month, and would love to connect with you on that. Again, peopledrivenresults.com and digitalprofitfarm.com. Finally, check out the Facebook group. We see some very legit people in there that are working really, really hard at their careers, and I would love to see you join in and learn from that knowledge base. We will see you next week with the Consultant and the Millennial.